Boston. Most of us know about Paul Revere's midnight ride, but did you know that he was not alone? In fact, there was a 16-year-old girl who also rode, and if you stay tuned, I'll explain. Hello everyone, Saltyhead here on another adventure. Today we're in Boston, Massachusetts, and we're going to hike the Freedom Trail. And this is where the American Revolution began. And right now I'm here at Bunker Hill, which is a very tall structure, which was built back in 1825. Now the Freedom Trail runs about 2.5 miles. There's 16 stops, and we're going to check them all out. It'll take around between 2 hours to 3 hours to walk the trail, and it's the whole history of the American Revolution. So it's very interesting. So come along and join me on this wonderful adventure. Now behind me is a statue of William Prescott, and what makes him so famous is that he's the one who said as the British were coming up Bunker Hill, don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes, because he didn't want them to waste any ammunition. And what makes Bunker Hill so famous was this was the second battle of the American Revolution. The first battle was actually fought in Concord, Massachusetts. Now today Anna will be joining me on this wonderful adventure, and she's walking on the trail itself, which is a couple of red bricks placed side by side all the way to Boston Common. Right now we're at stop number 15. This is the U.S. Constitution. It was commissioned in 1797 by General George Washington, our first president of the U.S. And it was called Old Ironsides. Well, Ironsides because the hull was made out of oak, and the British ships couldn't penetrate it with their cannonballs. So now we're on the USS Constitution. There's no charge to come on board. You do have to go through a search and metal detector. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Oldest warship in America right here. And now we're below deck. You can see there's a lot of people here. You can see the turrets for the cannons. But yeah, it's a Sunday and everybody's out. Nice beautiful day. And right now we're on the second level down. And this is where I guess everybody slept. There's a hammock. See the hammock? See the hammock right here? Yeah. So people used to sleep here. Good demo, Anna. Demo the hammock.
I like it down here.
But the ceilings, if you notice, the ceilings are only around 5 feet, 5'7", some 5'7". So they're very low. So you had to be short to be in the Navy without hitting your head. So these past two stops have been in Charlestown. Now we're going to head over to Boston proper, and we're going to cross over the Charles River. And this is where the British came. They had to cross they were in Boston, they had to cross the Charles River. And right now we just entered the north end of Boston, where all the Italianos live. And right now we're here at the Copp's Hill Burial Ground. This is stop number 14. And this is where the shipbuilder of the U.S. Constitution was buried, and also Robert Newman, who was one of the gentlemen that lit the lanterns in the Old North Chapel. So right behind me is the Old North Church, and this is stop number 13. And this is where Dr. Joseph Warren commanded Paul Revere to go on that famous midnight ride. And in the steeple of the church is where they hung the lanterns. And if there was one light, the British were coming by land, and if there were two lights, they were coming by sea. And it ended up that they came both ways because the British were stationed here in Boston, and they were on their move to attack the Minutemen in both Concord and on Bunker Hill. This is the Old North Church on the inside. And right in front of me is Paul Revere on his famous horse.
Real estate empire. Right, from the olden days, but basically they're spinning on some fantastic stuff. You know, they have like a so that's me. What about you?
And this is looking down, I think, North Margin Street here in the North End. Is Lucia's restaurant. A lot of good eating here in the Italian area. And lots of churches too. There's nothing like the Old North End here. Everywhere you turn, there's another restaurant, and they're all pretty good. Especially if you like Italian food. So right now we're at stop number 12. This is Paul Revere's house. It's the oldest house in Boston. And he bought this house when he was 35 years old. And what he did, he was a silversmith. So like I was saying, Paul Revere wasn't the only rider that night. There was two other midnight riders. One was William Dawes, and the other one was Samuel Prescott. And only Samuel Prescott actually made it to Concord. Dawes and Revere were actually caught by the British, and the horses were taken away from them. So they had to pretty much walk home. But there was another rider. Her name was Sybil Luddington. She was a 16-year-old girl, and this happened later on. She was also a midnight rider, and she rode from Boston all the way to Danbury, Connecticut, doing the same thing, warning the colonials about the British. But the only one that was made famous was Paul Revere because of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem about the midnight ride. Now right now we're coming into Faneuil Marketplace. This is the old oyster house here, and they've got really good seafood, a lot of history here, and it's on this cobbled stone road through the heart of Boston. So this looks like a new way to see the Freedom Trail on these segways. So you can walk, you can take the duck boat, or you can take a Segway now.
15 minutes just inside the Great Hall.
So right now we're at Faneuil Hall. This is stop number 11, and this is where the cradle of history occurred. This is where all the meetings occurred. In fact, this is where they actually planned the Boston Tea Party, right here in this building. This is what the colonists looked like back in the late 1800s. This is how they dressed.
Specifically, I'm a soldier in the 1st Brigade of Foot from New Hampshire. Basically, this is a brown wool coat, red waistcoat, the ancestor to the waistcoat, and brown breeches. These are called gaiters. They're to keep your shoes and your legs safe when you're riding on horses and clean from mud. It's pretty accurate. This is also the 1760s style. I'm playing an old-time enough soldier, and I choose to wear these instead of the half gaiters that finished there by the 1770s. This is broadly what a soldier would be wearing, and also all my kit, cartridge box, musket during that time.
Great. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
So right behind me is the old State House, which is stop number 10, and right in front is where the Boston Massacre occurred, and that's stop number 9. And what happened was, back on March 5th, 1770, on a very cold night, the British and the colonists were starting to get a little edgy, and so snowballs were thrown and some other projectiles, and so the British got really upset. They pulled out their guns and they started shooting into the crowd, and 5 colonists were mortally wounded. And so this was another nail in the coffin, and the beginning, another beginning sign of the American Revolution. So this is the site of the Boston Massacre. It happened right here. Behind me is the old meeting house, and this is stop number 8. And this is where the Boston Tea Party was organized. And this was another nail in the coffin for the American Revolution to start, because they kept imposing these high taxes on all the imports. And the tea came in, and it really bothered the colonists that they had to pay these taxes that they had no representation for. And so one night they dressed up as Indians and they went out to Boston Harbor, and they pushed all the tea crates right into the ocean and dumped the tea, and that really upset the British. And so this was another cause of the American Revolution. Behind me is the old Corner Bookstore. This is stop number 7. This is where all the early American publishing took place. This is where Nathaniel Hawthorne, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and Longfellow got all their books published right here on this location. But now it's a Chipotle. Go figure. So this is stop number 6. This is the Boston Latin School, and this is where all the signers of the Declaration of Independence went to school, like Benjamin Franklin, Paul Revere, Robert Paine, and John Hancock, whose statue stands right behind me. And he's the only one that didn't graduate. And by the way, the Boston Latin School is now at Ruth Chris Steakhouse. Right now we're at the Old King Cemetery burial ground, and And this is the oldest cemetery in Boston, and this is stop number 5. And in here was buried the first woman who stepped off the Mayflower, and also Governor Winthrop, the first governor in Massachusetts. And this cemetery inspired Nathaniel Hawthorne to write the Scarlet Letter. And in here somewhere there's a stone with an A on it, and this is the woman who had committed adultery that inspired Nathaniel Hawthorne to write that wonderful story. And yeah, she was scarred for life, unfortunately, and it carried right through to her grave. Right now we're in stop number 4, the Granary Burial Ground, and this is where a lot of famous people were buried, like John Hancock, Paul Revere, Robert Payne, and Samuel Adams. And behind me is actually the stone for Franklin, but he's not buried here. He's actually buried with his wife in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And these guys are all the signers, like I said, of the Declaration of Independence. But this is also where the 5 colonists that were shot in the Boston Massacre are buried. And so there's a lot of history here, and all these stones were all positioned so that they could maintain the cemetery. But it's very, very old. It's the 3rd oldest cemetery in Boston. So this is stop number 3. And this is the Park Street Church, and it's built in 1809. And this is where William Lloyd Garrison made his famous anti-slavery speech. And it's also, by the way, one of the tallest churches in Boston. It's 217 feet high. So if you were coming in from Western Mass and north or south, this is the steeple that you would see, indicating you were getting close to Boston. Right now we're at stop number 2, and this is the Massachusetts State House. And this was built on land owned by John Hancock. This used to be a big cow pasture, and the state picked it up and bought it, and they built this beautiful state house. And up on top you can see gold leaf as the dome. And before that they actually had wood, and after that they had copper, which Paul Revere placed on the dome. And then of course back in 1874 they added the gold leaf to make it look the way it is now. It's very beautiful. Well, welcome to stop number 1. This is where the Freedom Trail begins, and this is on 50 acres of land. It's called the Boston Common, and here we have things like the duck boats, we have the public garden. It's just a beautiful place to hang out, sit and watch life go by. Well, I hope you really enjoyed this video. It took a lot longer than 2.5 hours. It took like 6.5 hours, and you know, we didn't stop and look at every little thing. We were moving, so this could probably take more than a day to see everything. So really, I hope you enjoyed the Freedom Trail. It's where the American Revolution started back in 1775. And so until next time, this is Saltyhead here in Boston, Massachusetts, and we'll see you next time.